All right, so today we're going to talk about one of the biggest, most universal mysteries out there. What actually happens at the exact moment we die? We're going to explore this from an Islamic perspective, which offers some incredibly detailed and, frankly, shocking answers about this final journey.
You know, it's a question we all think about at some point, right? Is it a peaceful fade out? Is it painful? What does a person actually see and feel when their soul leaves their body? So let's just dive right into it and see what the sources say.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at the raw physical experience of that final moment. Then, we'll get into the two very, very different paths a soul can take. After that, we'll switch gears and look at our responsibilities, how we, the living, should act when visiting graves. And finally, we'll cover the rights that the deceased still have, even after they're gone.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning, that initial moment of passing. According to the teachings we're looking at, the soul leaving the body is, well, it's an unbelievably intense physical event.
Now, to give you an idea of just how intense we're talking about, listen to this. The Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said that a single pain of death is more severe than being hit with 300 swords. Wow. I mean, that's a powerful and pretty startling way to help us even begin to imagine the sheer force of that moment.
And this whole experience, it actually has distinct physical signs. The sources describe things like the body sweating a lot, the eyes moving around quickly, the sides of the nose getting narrow, the chest rising up as breathing gets harder, and the face turning pale or yellow. These are all seen as the outward signs of that internal struggle as the soul prepares to depart.
But here's the thing, and this is absolutely crucial. The experience is not the same for everyone. A core idea in these teachings is that how you die is directly connected to how you lived.
This is the moment of truth. As a person is passing, they're shown a kind of highlight reel of their entire life, all the good they did and all the bad. And right after that, they're shown their final destination, whether it's a place of reward or punishment. This is the pivot point that changes everything that happens next.
And this really shows us those two paths just splitting dramatically. For the believer, it's described as angels gently coaxing the soul out. They get a glimpse of their place in paradise, they're greeted with peace, and this makes them excited for what comes next. For the non-believer, though, it's the complete opposite. It's described as violent. The angels literally tear the soul out. The source material compares it to pulling a thorny branch through wet wool. You can imagine how damaging and painful that would be. They're shown their punishment, they're struck by angels, and they become absolutely terrified.
So when you hear this famous quote, it's easy to misunderstand it. It's not really about a general fear of dying, which, let's be honest, is natural for pretty much everyone. The Prophet actually clarified that this refers specifically to that moment of revelation we just talked about. The believer, seeing their reward, starts to love the idea of meeting God. The non-believer, seeing their terrible fate, starts to hate it. It's all about their reaction to the destination they've just been shown.
Okay, so after that intense spiritual moment for the person who has passed, the focus actually shifts to us, to the living. The sources give really clear instructions on our responsibilities, and that starts with how we're supposed to behave when we visit a cemetery.
Yeah, there's a whole etiquette to it. When you visit, you should face the grave, or the direction of prayer, and say this specific greeting. It's really a beautiful message. It's a wish for peace, it's a reminder of our own mortality, and it's a prayer for everyone, both the living and the dead.
And the whole purpose of the visit is about more than just showing up. It's meant to be a time for real reflection on how short this life is. It's highly encouraged to read from the Quran, especially a chapter called Yasin, and to pray for the person who has passed away. These actions are seen as being good for both you, the visitor, and the person in the grave.
Now, just like there are things you should do, there's a list of things you should definitely not do. Things like wailing and screaming are discouraged. Physical acts like kissing the grave or treating it like some kind of shrine are forbidden, because that can get in the way of the core belief in one God. And other things like walking on top of graves or lighting candles on them are just seen as disrespectful. This brings us to our last section, which is this really interesting idea that the dead still have rights. In Islam, just because someone is buried doesn't mean their sanctity is gone. The living actually have duties to protect their final resting place.
And these rites are remarkably specific. Things like walking on graves or making a mess in the cemetery are considered makruh, which is a term for something that's disliked or offensive. And get this, even cutting living plants or trees in the cemetery falls under this. The reason for that is just fascinating. It's believed that as long as a plant is alive, it's praising God, and that can bring some comfort to the deceased nearby. And this sanctity is protected by a super strict rule against exhumation, which is known as Napsh. Basically, once a person is buried, that's it. Their grave is not to be disturbed. The only time it's even considered is for an absolute critical necessity. And even then, the body of the deceased must not be touched. The point is, the grave is a final, untouchable sanctuary.
So, after exploring all of this, the sheer intensity of death, those two completely different paths, and our duties to those who've passed, we're left with this one big question, aren't we? The sources suggest that the way to prepare for a good ending is to live a good life. It's about trying to live in a way that aligns with God's commandments and turning away from sin. In the end, these teachings frame death not as the end, but as a perfect mirror, reflecting the life that was lived. What you see in that final moment, it all depends on what you did in all the moments that came before it.